Mack,
Here.
Braden, no, LaCroy,
Here.
Mackey,
Here.
Miller, here, Strack.
Here. So we've established a quorum. Pledge allegiance, please. Okay, next I need approval for the agenda.
Miller, Strack,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye. Next we have public comments, and I think I saw somebody
Yep,
sign up.
right there.
Oh, yes.
Oh my, I didn't practice this at home. Okay, well, hi, my name is Amber LaCroy. I am here tonight. As I know you're voting whether to renew your contract with your current food vendor, Arbor Management. While the topic is in front of the board, I would like to explore possible changes to the breakfast menu that will have significant impact on student learning. I have here the breakfast menu for our schools. And as you look at that, you can see that we are offering our children highly processed, quite nutritious, and filled with an enormous amount of sugar. Even if you've not done a large amount of research on nutrition and the effects it has on learning, common sense tells you that donuts, Pop-Tarts, Trix cereal are simply not the best food for brain development. These foods are not only innutritious though, they are quite harmful to our children. High sugar consumption can have numerous negative consequences. However, for tonight's purposes, I'm solely focusing on sugar and its effect on learning. Research demonstrates the negative impact sugar has on the brain. Neuroscientists have proven a high intake of sugar floods your brain with the hormone cortisol. This hormone interrupts the neurotransmitter's abilities to function, thereby causing a reduction in memory and learning capacity. In addition to cortisol, brain scans have shown inflammation of the hippocampus. The hippocampus is involved in the formation of new memories, and it is also associated with emotions, and it is associated with learning. Now let's take a look at how much sugar is in the breakfast options and put it all together. The daily recommended sugar intake for children is 6 teaspoons. That's about 25 grams of sugar. Our donuts that we serve are 21 grams of sugar. And when we add in the juice for 10 grams, we're already over the daily recommended sugar intake, and that's for one meal. In combination with the research showing sugar's effects on student learning, we can again look to our current menu and we clearly see that most of these options are lacking a balance of nutrients. For example, where's the protein that is also shown to improve student learning? When we look to Arbor Management's example of their hot breakfast menu, which is in the back of your packet, it clearly shows attainable alternatives that can incorporate protein and reduce sugary choices. In fact, in their menu on their website, I do not see donuts. I do not see Grammy Bears. I do not see Trix nor Pop-Tarts. I've spent some time researching solutions and do recognize we have specific challenges that need to be addressed in order to make these changes. But I do believe that these changes are ones that we can and should implement, as we all know that is necessary for our children to be successful, engaged learners. Please remember that a small change can have a very large impact on our children. I look forward to further discussing specific solutions with you, and I thank you for your time tonight and for all that you do. Please know that it is truly appreciated.
Next, we are at board reports. Anybody have anything for?
I promise I'm not going to give a board report every time I attend one of my kids' school functions, but I can't help every time I go to one of these band or chorus performances being totally amazed by what I'm hearing and seeing. Last night was a 5th and 6th grade choral concert at Frederick, and the GMS Select Choir came and did a couple of numbers. And I got to tell you, I'm not suggesting that we hire them out per se, but I would have paid money to watch that performance. It was incredible and inspiring, and it just goes to show how important an arts education is. I'm glad that this board and boards before it got that part of our curriculum back up to speed, and I'm just grateful that I think most of us here on the board feel that it's a very important part of the curriculum.
I'll share. I was able to attend the Park Campus 5K on Sunday, I think it was. And this is the second year that I've been able to attend. I certainly am not running it, but I'm cheering on the runners. And my daughter gets to participate in it chiefly because it's opened up recently to the kids in the MILE program, which is the special education program. And I think that's something, another feather in our cap for District 46 to open that up to those kids. I think special kudos to the park PTO is in order for planning that event and putting that together, and it was a beautiful morning. And also I think the MILE teachers, Mrs. Owens and all of the teachers in that program for helping the kids to do the Girls Gotta Run program, and helping kids who need additional help, who might be in a wheelchair like Isabella, or others who need additional help to participate in something like that. And coming across the finish line is a big thing for all of those runners. So it was a great event, and kudos to all the runners and to the staff and teachers who put that all together.
That's great.
Anyone else? Good. Up to you.
So piggybacking on Jason's comment, the music in the park on Saturday, our symphonic band from GMS got a perfect score. It's never happened before, so that's pretty awesome, and we were pleased. They had just been in at U of I the day before on Friday performing too, so they were tired. They got back late Friday night and then did that on Saturday. This week is Teacher Appreciation Week, so things have been going on in all our buildings, appreciating all the work that our teachers do. And Dr. Glickman joined our late start today with the fine arts, so she got to meet the fine arts people. And I think, oh, the other thing I was wondering, we've already sent out our calendar for the board meetings for next year, but with Jim being on shift sometimes, we were wondering if the board would mind it having all our meetings here at GMS rather than at Park. Okay, great, thank you. That's it for me.
Committee reports?
The Diversity Committee will meet again on June 12th, and we won't have any more evaluation assessment curriculum committees till next year.
Okay. Consent agenda. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And that'll include the addendum that was on your desk this afternoon.
Second.
Mackey,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Miller. Aye. Mack,
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye. Okay, next are action items. The first one is the handwriting curriculum purchases. I'm looking for a motion to approve that as we discussed last meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any questions? Okay.
Weedman,
Aye.
Miller. Aye. Mack,
Aye.
Mackey,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Strack.
Aye.
Okay, and next is a motion to approve the Arbor Management Food Services contract.
I'll second.
And obviously, if we can
Yeah, we'll.
address the
yeah,
concerns
we
that
will.
were
Yep.
brought up.
John and I'll take care of that.
Okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Miller. Aye. Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
Mackey.
Motion to approve the Arbor Management Food Services lunch prices.
So moved. Second.
Can you give us a little recap, John, about the increases year over year and
So this year we're keeping our lunch prices and the same as they were last year. The only changes would be increases in some of the à la carte items like potato chips, cookies, things like that. Just by a nickel each, I believe.
what are the, in your letter, it talked about this pricing is in line with the guidelines. Could you talk a little bit about what constraints we have on what we need to charge?
The long story short is for the National School Lunch Program, the federal government wants to make sure that we're not collecting money from the school lunch program and then thereby subsidizing the paid meals for our regular full-price students. So as long as we can prove to them that we have a financially sound program and we're not using National School Lunch Program dollars to subsidize the costs of a regular meal, that's how we can keep it at a normal $2.90 rate.
John, I had a question about the nutritional content, because there's been two, and relative to cost, because in 2010, it was the Hunger-Free Kids Act, which created nutritional standards that were relaxed in 2018. So do we have any idea of whether the cost reflects the old nutritional content or the newer?
So that's a great question. I reached out to our nutritionist at Arbor, and she, just to give the full amount of information, the rules that were relaxed were you no longer need a waiver to make half your grains whole grain rather than 100% grain. So that was one of those weird grain issues. Flavored milk can now be at a higher fat level than skim milk, and the sodium guidelines, they've been trying to reduce the amount of sodium in the food, and they've had target goals, and they laxed that for 1 year. However, that was supposed to go in effect February of 2019, so it should have gone into effect a couple of months ago, but 5 states and the District of Columbia sued the government for trying to enact that, so, and one of them was Illinois. So Arbor has not been going with the laxed guidelines. They've been sticking with the old guidelines until the lawsuit figures itself out.
Okay. And I think a study showed that the waste, there was like a fear that if we served healthier food, it would go in the garbage because kids wouldn't eat it, but actually that has not panned out. There's research that shows the waste is actually reduced. Did they talk about that at all?
They did not. I did not address that with them.
Okay, thanks.
And would we be, if we address a concern such as the one that Mrs. LaCroix brought up tonight, as well as I believe a meeting or two before, we can get an update on what they might be doing?
And that was a
So we know that
conversation I
they're
had with
acting
her
on
as well
something?
as.
Because I would agree with all of this and think that it would need to be, a more wholesome.
I apologize. I didn't mean to speak over you.
No.
So in light of the conversation from the last board meeting, that's what prompted the conversation with the nutritionist at Arbor. And
Right, okay.
she said if, part of it is it would be hard to make changes for this year because they have to plan with the Department of Defense for all the commodities, and they've already planned that for the year, but they're also now trying to work on next year's menu. So we've already set up a time to try to meet to talk about any concerns that they have. So we're open to having those conversations, and Arbor is as well.
Thank you.
Well, so the things that we offer for breakfast and how different they are from the last page of the packet, is that a choice we're making?
The difference is no, we're not, but the difference is that's the hot breakfast, and we don't have hot breakfast.
We don't do hot breakfast for manpower reasons, for equipment reasons?
We would have to cook them here and get them to every building, except for Park. Park does their own, so we can't do that twice a day. But that
Okay.
doesn't mean we can't look at what's offered. That's
Right. Essentially, we need healthy cold lunch options.
correct, right.
Any more questions? Okay.
Strack,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mackey,
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye. Next is, I need a motion to approve the ESCO alarm service contract.
Second.
And this was a flat rate.
Yeah, no change.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Next one is a motion to approve Barbara Zares as interim principal of Avon School and Title I coordinator for the 1920 school year.
So moved?
Second.
Can you just explain the process that we went through?
Sure, we we posted the position and tried to talk Barbara into applying it the first time. In any case, we narrowed it to 8. Then 2 different teams consisting of administrators, parents, and teachers interviewed the 8 candidates. There were like 2 different teams, but they saw each candidate. Then it went down to 4. Was it 4?
May I?
Yes, you may.
All right. We started with our online application. We had 38 applicants.
Oops, I was off by 2.
It's then we used the RIVS system, the video one-way interview system that I presented to you. We narrowed that down to 8 candidates. There were 4 individuals at the district level that were looking at those interviews. They broke that 38 down into 8 individuals. We brought those 8 individuals in to meet with 2 groups of parents, teachers, and administrators, as Ellen said. We were able to narrow that group down to 3 individuals, but none really got, everybody were like, yes, that's what that's what we're looking for. Then they met with administrators from across the district and at the central office. Again, nobody really wowed us. And instead of reposting that position, because we just went through 38 candidates, and we're in May now, so those were going to be our top candidates. We turned to Barbara, as Barbara has filled in and helped all year, the past couple of years, as we kind of filled that dual role, as you all know, with kind of HR and building principal that's been going on. And so Barbara has worked with the staff of Avon for many years, several years, and has a trust and the knowledge that, and a passion for Avon that will keep Avon moving forward. She's the only one I trust to take over.
Any questions?
Will there be a similar, the Title I coordinator part of it? Is that like going to be the similar arrangement that Chris had where?
No, not right now.
Okay.
She's going to be staying right at Avon and do the Title I from Avon.
Okay.
Can I just ask one more question? Will she have any assistant type help, or if she's
There'll be
doing-
there'll be 2 instructional coaches
Okay.
that will be able to help. And then Paul will be acting as her mentor.
Miller,
Aye.
Mackey,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Okay, and next is a motion, I need a motion to approve the 1-year contract extension for CSPO John Herron for the 1920 school year.
So moved? Second?
Any questions?
And we apologize, it should have been on with the rest of the administrators. So,
He forgot.
yeah, it is his fault, but
I blame him.
Okay. Mackey,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Okay, next is a motion to approve a 3% increase for non-union district office staff for the 1920 school year. This is consistent to what we did with the administrators
Correct.
in the last meeting.
This applies to just a handful of people, right?
yes, 7.
So moved?
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
Mackey,
Aye.
Miller,
I'm going to abstain on this one. I just feel like I need to get my head around salaries and negotiations first.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Next is a motion to, is that all right? Motion to approve, the motion to approve the termination of employment for Jackie Golden Letek as a probationary employee of the school district effective immediately.
So moved. Second.
Any questions? They're limited what we can ask, but, okay.
Mackey,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Okay, next is unfinished business. Update on collection of student fees.
Everybody's favorite topic. So a couple months back, we had talked about the status of student fees in the district and our collection rates on it. I'm happy to report that we've made some adjustments to our website and to our collection process in terms of what letters we send out and the level of contact we've had with parents about it. So far in the last month, we've collected, since we've made those changes, we've collected an additional $12,357.50. So we're really happy about that. We were in the process of speaking with several collections agencies to get a sense of what that would look like before coming to you as a board with any thoughts or recommendations for collection agencies. At this time, we feel pretty excited about the level of collections that we've had just through our own efforts and changes. And I think we're going to take one more year with these new processes and these new, with the new website to see what changes those have made and see if that improves our collection rate before we do anything or make any recommendations about going to a collections agency for assistance on these.
Okay, anybody have any questions for them?
Yeah, can you refresh us on the amount outstanding and maybe the aging buckets you're talking about? Are we talking about like a year, more than a year old, or?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I would say I believe the numbers were 65,000 in uncollected fees from fiscal year 17, 50,000 or so from fiscal year 18, and then this year we were trending upwards of 70,000. So we're excited to see obviously that number come down with some of our renewed efforts this month. And just for some of the changes, to talk about some of the changes, we had been contacting parents a lot through either phone calls or through emails. And this was the first time we sent out a formal letter to make parents aware this is a pretty serious situation. And I think that's what caused us to have the pretty dramatic increase in our collection rate. So we're hoping that by instituting that for longer than just 1 month in April at the end of a year, especially when it's coming time for the next round of student registration fees, we're hoping that if we start aggressively tackling this in September, October, November, December, that'll help with some of our collection rates over the course of the year.
Forgive me because I haven't looked, but did we make any additional options for donating, as was brought up at a couple of meetings? If people who want to donate, that would go into a pool to assist families that might not be able to pay their fees.
I know that
I didn't look, so
yeah.
excuse me if that's an ignorant question, but I didn't look to see if there was a donate button, but I just thought
I know that's something that we're in the works of doing. I don't know if it's been officially applied yet, but I'm happy to look into that and give you a note in the next meeting.
Pardon me?
Was that for lunches only?
I think
Or
they
is
had
it-
it.
or is
I think we were
across- is it
discussing it
across-
for both for lunches
Okay.
and for registration fees. But
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to look into that.
No, yeah, thank you.
John, I have a question, and I apologize if you've already told us this and I missed it, but is there a trend about what is not being paid for? Is it primarily food? Is it primarily fees? Is it?
Yeah, the 2-second summary I would say is student fees as a whole have been a hard area for us to collect on. I'm
Right.
still trying to collect data from other districts to see if this is a trend larger than Gray's Lake. My sense is it isn't, but I'm trying to collect that data too. And then lunch fees were a specific issue for this year. In most years, we've ended the years with balances, total balances of all across the district of under $5,000. And this year, the last time we checked, we're at over $28,000. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with some of the changes that we made in how we serve student lunches. Before, it used to be you had a paper card that you had to buy in the front office, and if you didn't have a paper card, you couldn't get a meal, or you would be given, you'd have to fill out an IOU. With the change in the new digital system, students can now walk up and enter a PIN code, and then because of that, there isn't the, it's easier to, they don't know what their balance is, right? So they just know that they're getting a lunch and they enter their PIN code and they're following it through, but then it's making it more of a challenge for parents, I would say, on the backside to keep tabs on that. It's not as, before, as a parent, if you wanted your kid to have a lunch at school, you had to send them with money, but now it's almost, it's more passive, like it just happens that you now have a balance if your student punches in a PIN code.
Is there a way to assist with helping them set up their reoccurring payments? I know my son goes through a ton of food around here. I keep getting a $50 charge every time I turn around, which explains the 20-pound weight gain since wrestling I did. But just something, maybe we reach out to some of them, maybe they, during registration, help them get it all set up to begin with, might cut some of that down.
It's funny you mentioned that. A principal who shall remain nameless in this room also had an issue setting up his recurring payments. We just had that conversation at lunch today.
See,
So
who could that be? There's two of them in here now.
there's two people, so I'm not focusing anybody. So that's something that I know has been brought up previously as well. So it's something that I'm working with Nikki on to try to, our data manager on, to try to get that adjusted. There's also conversations. We've had several parents express they send their kid to school with a meal, and their kid says, I don't want what mom sent me with, so they get a lunch anyway. So we have to create a form for the parents to sign to say, hey, please don't sell my kid a lunch, because I am sending them with meals. So there's a couple of different things I think that'll help in future years, but it was just with the change in the other thing too is there's been a change in the laws on how we can even collect fees from students for lunches. For this year, not that we ever would have done this, but there was laws about you can't lunch shame people in terms of you can't post balances that were past due, you can't cut them off, you can't serve them a different meal if they can't pay for, they have to get the same meal. So it was just kind of one of those perfect storm situations, I think, between figuring out a new digital system and changes in laws.
With that new system, is it possible to send parents an email every time there's a charge?
Mm-hmm.
I believe so. I know that we do send emails out, but the other thing we've talked about is since we've had such great success in sending letters again, not that we're going, now that I feel like we're going backwards in terms of the technology era, but since we've had such great success with the paper letters going home, that's something else that we've talked about doing is sending, okay, now in addition to the emails, which don't seem to be having the same response that we'd like, maybe we need to start sending paper letters home as well.
I would also like to report that I feel like setting up the recurring payments wasn't super easy. Like I felt like I had done it at the beginning of the year, and then like 6 weeks later, I got like, your account is in arrears type of an email, and then set it up again, and I'm pretty sure I'm current now. But I doubt even that problem is probably the majority of the balances, but it couldn't hurt to make that a little easier and more intuitive. So. And the other question I have is a follow-up. Were registration fees part of this outstanding balance? Like beginning of the year registration fees, is that included in this, the balances you're talking about?
The 65 and the 50,000 that you were talking about, or?
Yeah, whatever the problem we're talking about, which is the past due fees, does that include like beginning of the year registration fees? Okay.
It's almost exclusively beginning of the year registration fees. It's not anything to do with the student activity fees or any of the other fees that we collect.
So the biggest part of this problem is the registration. Okay.
Any more questions? Okay. Next is an update on negotiations. Really nothing has changed. So we still have the meeting on the 29th. That is our next meeting with the unions.
We tried to get one before that, but that didn't work out.
And they haven't sent any new dates.
I've asked to have them send us in June, and I have not received it.
Okay, next would be update on, well, actually first, anybody have any questions on that? Okay, next would be the update on the hardware abatement.
Our other favorite topic. Ellen and I have worked really hard to try to coordinate with District 127 response to the village's requests. We've reached out to several different legal counsels on this. We've reached out to several financial advisors on this. At this time, District 127 is wishing to proceed with a proposal where they will artificially deflate the EAV of Harger. So basically working with the county assessor to say, hey, we know you're saying the property is worth 1.8 million, but we would like you to actually say that the property is worth 1 million.
And this is only on the existing property, not any new.
Okay.
So that's their current proposal. I think that's what they're going to be working with their board on. I let them know that in conversations with Ellen and with our legal counsel, I don't feel like that's the best option for District 127, or excuse me, for District 46.
We would be losing, what, 16,000?
Essentially $13,000 would get shifted to the rest of the taxpayers in the district. The one proposal that we've talked about, and it was what FedEx has done, what we did for FedEx before, when they came in several years ago, is again, just focusing on the new property only portion of it, because they've talked about staying and building on if we can agree to some form of tax relief for them. The appealing part, if you can say any part of this has been appealing, is with abating only the portion of new property that comes on, is then therefore not shifting any of that tax burden to the rest of the taxpayers in the district. The argument would be, since this is new property, if they moved, we would have never seen this new property to begin with. So that is my personal recommendation to the board would be either to go along those lines, and I can have a more formal proposal or presentation at the next board meeting. Or my other thought would be to not offer anything at all. At this point, I feel like we're in a really hard position with the village. I appreciate all the things that they've done to help the district over the years. However, it's hard for me to look at new money and say we can't, we've got enough. I don't think we have enough. I can't look at people and say we're a tier 1 district in the state and we need as much money as we can get, but we're willing to make an agreement for one company to stay. What's also concerning for me is I've now heard from other business managers throughout Lake County that they're starting to be approached for some of these, and I don't want to be the example that gets used for other districts of, hey, well, District 46 did it, why don't you do it for us as well? So I'm concerned with, maybe this is outside of my role, but I'm concerned with the trend or the pattern that would set for future negotiations and the position that would put other districts in if we were to say, we agree to this. And so
I think that's a legitimate concern. To me, I still feel like this is way outside of the mission of the school district. It's way outside of our fiduciary responsibility, and just something that we shouldn't even be involved with. It undermines our authority to school board, just like the FedEx deal before this undermined our authority now in this matter. I don't feel like I can support doing this. It's not what we should be doing. It's what the village should be doing, and that's fine. But it's not to use a tier 1 school district or a tier 2 school district or any school district, an inadequately funded district, as leverage to keep a business in town by impacting whether it's the EAV for that district or the property taxes collected, whatever it is to me just unfair and not something that I'll be able to support. That's my 2 cents.
John, I have thought about an idea, and we've talked about it a little bit, but just there are grants available, federal and local and state grants available for retrofitting existing buildings with more green energies that do save money. I mean, we've done it with solar panels, and I know that those grants need to be pieced together. It's not like you're going to get one that will offset all of Harder's expenses. But it might be worth, I don't know if there's any energy in the district to look for those grants to say to Harder, we want you to stay, we want you to stay. But if we work together to find grants that financed some of their expansion, that then would be benefits that would stay in the community regardless of whether Harvard left in 10 years or 5 years too. Is there any possibility that the grants like that, does anyone know, exist?
We can look into
I know
it.
we've been
Okay,
looking
someone
at
can
solar
find out.
panels for our house, and there's quite a bit out there. If you're willing to have the benefits pay out in 10 years or more.
We can
It might
certainly
be a
look into
way.
it.
Yeah, Steve and I are on two different sides of the coin on the whole issue. You know, I look at it as if we can do something that's on the new property, we still get an increase in our tax dollars. And while it's not as much over the 5 or 10 year period, whatever the abatement is, it's still an increase of where we're at. And eventually it goes up again once the time frame is over. The other part is if they do up and leave, there's not a lot of people that are in line to take over that building and then run a business out of it. And they can apply to have their EAV dropped and go to a vacant building, and now we're actually losing revenue versus even going up a little bit. So I don't necessarily like I guess more or less corporate welfare either. But for our district that is already struggling to keep property taxes and keep the EAV up in order to be able to fund the things we want, to not try and help a business stay in town by giving up a portion of new growth is, to me, a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, because we need that revenue. We don't have very much in the way of commercial property in our district as it is. And we let one go across the border just because we don't want to abate, $12,000 or $13,000 a year for a few years. While we gain that much almost. It's a little hard for me to see. I don't think that's necessarily being responsible with the money that we could be bringing in as well. So there's two different sides to the coin, two different opinions on it. I don't really like being in the position that we're in. I agree with Stephen, I don't like being leveraged. But the company's been here for a long time. They employ a lot of employees. They're gonna employ more employees by doing so. They eat at the restaurants, they buy stuff from the feed sales, they have an impact on the village as a whole. I would hate to see a domino effect where somebody else goes out of business because they don't have people that come and buy in their restaurant. And that's just another vacant building, another vacant space. Village has only come to us once so far, and this is twice in the time, since FedEx, and FedEx has been there 15 years, roughly. The village has done a lot in order to keep businesses in town and attract new businesses in town by doing the stuff that they can do and touching all the things they can do. This is just one where they want our help. They're asking for 127 for help as well. If we can find a way to do, based on the EAV and the new growth, then we're not really out anything. We're out, the only thing we're out is stuff that's coming in the future. We're not gonna lose current tax dollars, which then wouldn't spread that out to the rest of the taxpayers. So that's my opinion that's, I guess, to coin Stephen's phrase, that's my 2 cents.
So do we have a limit as to how much we will pay companies to stay in our, have we ever talked about that?
No, there's no policy in place or anything.
Right, and that was part of when we sat down and talked with the village, the park district, the fire district, us and 127, we discussed that, we felt we were a little blindsided by the village with the information coming. So talked about with them was procedures on how to move forward if this comes up again. So there's a policy of what we will and will not do, and how it gets approached to us and everything else like that, instead of just kind of, came out of left field and said, hey, can you guys do this? So the lines of communication with the village, I think, opened up a little bit in order to be able to have those type of discussions.
Well, I hope that this opens up the opportunity to have those discussions in the future, because like Stephen and Jim, I'm constantly caught in the middle of this decision, because if we continue to set this precedent, then we abdicate authority that the board shouldn't have been put in that role, right? But if we don't try to act as a, legitimate, engaged community governing body with the other community bodies, then, we risk getting blamed for having businesses move out of Gray's Lake, and you lose a lot of the support that those families, those are families who have children in our school district too. If that business leaves, they leave. They're unemployed suddenly, and their families are put at risk. So we're faced with that decision too. I'm not a fan of giving corporate relief at all, but I think the communication on the part of the village was such that it put us in this bind, and we need to figure out how to increase that communication. So I tend to be more for something at this point. What that is, I don't know yet. I'm interested in knowing if Harger has actually made any further comments on this whole process, or if they're just sitting quietly.
Sorry, yes, I have not heard anything directly from Harger or the village. Not that the village has been uncommunicative, it's just the village has been waiting to see what District 127 and we would like to do. They've said repeatedly they're open to whatever proposals we have. They just would like to have some form of a
Can
proposal.
both be different? Are we still at that, or were we trying to coordinate both responses? District 127.
At this point, we could go separately in terms of an agreement, and if that's what the board would like, I'm more than happy to try to craft some form of proposal to work forward with the village on that. I'm not sure what District 127 would do at that point, but we've expressed to 127 that I don't think we have an interest in going down the precedential road of artificially deflating
Right.
property values.
The opportunity here is that these conversations now should happen before anything like this comes before the board again.
Right.
And so if we take that as the learning opportunity and this growth opportunity, we can then continue to impact the community in positive ways if we all are talking about these things together. But it puts such a bind on now that it's hard to decide.
So to make sure I'm understanding correctly, so for the next board meeting, not for vote, but for discussion, I'll have some form of a proposal ready to be voted for or against on new property abatement, and then also in conjunction with that, some form of policy for how to handle these, at least from a district perspective, and a request for the village of how we communicate that. Is that an accurate?
I would like to see the policy first before we.
There's a policy first.
Yeah, and I would reach out, to me, if we can reach out to the village and see if there's a, hard and fast timeline that they're looking to get this done, so that we don't just arbitrarily jump in and say, yep, we're gonna do it, and then.
We don't want to negotiate against ourselves.
Right. So, that way we're kind of all on the same page and come together with the village and the other taxing bodies as a whole. Right, as you say, I don't want to give up more than we have to. Because if we give up too much, then somebody doesn't have to give up the same amount, and we provided more than what we should. So somewhere make it equitable across the board.
Is it also possible to buy us some time to create, I don't know what the policy creation process is yet, but can we buy some time so that we can have time to create the new policy before we vote it up or down, so that then the policy is in place immediately? Because I think you said that there are other companies that are starting to have these conversations with the village, so it might be good to have our decision made by then.
Not just the village, this is starting to go across Lake County. There's, most counties in Illinois have an internal department for economic development. Lake County has actually outsourced that to a nonprofit organization, and it's that organization that's been reaching out to several other neighboring districts about other opportunities for tax abatements on other projects that are coming down the pipeline, is what I was
So
referring
it
to.
doesn't stop with Harger.
It's not going to
It's gonna-
stop with Harger.
And we have evidence, that's not a fear, there's evidence behind that. Is there evidence behind the assumption that, that people will leave, that if a company leaves? I know that I wasn't aware that they patronize the feed store so much too. So do we have numbers behind that? Do we have evidence behind that, or is that
The village
like
gave those.
an assumption? The village just,
They have some estimates on the economic impact. I'm happy to share those again.
and their sources?
And to answer your other question about a timeline, theoretically, the taxes for this is going to sound weird, the taxes for 2018, I know we're in 2019, but 2018 is the tax year, have already been set, so we couldn't do anything for 2018 anyway. So at this point, theoretically, we have all the way, depending upon the village and Harger, but in terms of when something would take effect, we would have all the way until next January or February before we'd have to make any firm decisions for a 2019 tax.
Yeah, I would say just a rough draft on a policy to go over so we all can chew it close. Nothing to vote up or down on, it's just.
Right. At this point, it would just be suggestions for a proposal or policy information.
And then,
Is the state of play the village is waiting for us to come back with what we think we can do?
The village is waiting to hear from us whether we're going to do something or not, and if so, what our proposal would be to try to meet what Harger is looking for an abatement. Obviously, Harger has their request of what they want, but that doesn't, speaking of negotiations, just because they've requested that doesn't mean that that has to be the hard and final number, I think. So we can continue to negotiate those numbers and what that looks like.
A couple of points. As far as timeline, there isn't one that we've ever been given,
Right.
other than hearsay or whatever. So as far as I'm concerned, we can set our own timeline. There's no actual evidence that Harger is really going to leave, other than the numbers that the village has given us, based on estimates that we don't have any validation for. I can't imagine they have someone lined up to buy that building already. I'd be surprised if they have a license for business in Wisconsin at this point. So if they're leaving, it's not going to be for a long, long time. So again, I don't think that we're in any rush to do this, and we should do the policy. We should have a policy in place in the district first before we approve anything for anyone. The other thing, just to address something that Stephen said about being good members of the community, I would argue that as a school district, we are doing what we're supposed to do to be good members of the community. We educate the kids here that are here, and that's what we're supposed to do. And that's our purview, that's our responsibility, and that's what we take care of. So I think that we do plenty in that area for the community of Grays Lake and the surrounding communities that are involved in the district as well. So I don't know that we need to expand into areas that aren't really our responsibility anyway.
Namely, economic development.
Economic development.
I think it's an interesting play on words too, because neighbors are people, and this is a company that's not the same, and so it infuses some affect that, for me at least, there's a disconnect between. This isn't my. It's also not cool for me to say to Steve, hey, can you pay for my kid's college, or could you pay my taxes? Like that's also maybe part of the equation that would be salient to this discussion of what does it mean to be a good neighbor.
any other questions or comments? I think we're all had pretty good comments.
I think we have more philosophical discussions to come.
Oh, yeah. It'll be a hard decision one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Okay, next is new business. Discussion of the Durham transportation contract.
So Durham has come to us with a 6% increase year over year. At this point, I feel pretty confident that that's a pretty acceptable number after speaking with several other business managers in the area who have gone out to bid recently or had their contract renewals. 6% is actually on the low side of what they've experienced. Some of them have experienced upwards of 25% increases in their transportation costs. Part of this is driven by some of the economy with the price of gas, but the biggest driving factor has been the hourly rate of bus drivers. In the last 3 years, it's gone from $17.50 per hour to $20 per hour. And even that rate is, there's even talks that that rate might need to go even higher. I don't know if you've driven down 45 recently, but there's even big billboards for people advertising for their bus drivers as far away as Lincolnshire here in Grays Lake. So similar to the substitute shortage, there's a pretty dramatic shortage in bus drivers, and we're starting to feel that pinch. So 6% is a little bit high, but when I compare that with how high the hourly rates have had to go just to keep bus drivers, and like I said, when one fellow business manager said his rate went up 25%, I was very thankful that that wasn't us. The other good parts, I think, about renewing the contract with them, I've been happy to see that they've been making investments in their fleet. The average fleet vehicle has gone down 1 year, so that means that they've been buying newer and newer vehicles and replacing some of their older vehicles at a faster rate. So I'm excited to see that that should be improving some of their reliability issues. So with that, I feel confident in recommending them at the next board meeting for approval of renewing their contract at 6%.
Is there an opportunity, similar to what we did a year or so ago, of looking at the busing routes and seeing where, rerouting things so that maybe we eliminate something where we can save a little money on top of that?
Yes, we'll continue to do that.
Is there a tipping point that we could identify? Because we've talked in the past about, or looked in the past at possibly bringing busing in district instead of outsourcing. Is there a dollar amount tipping point that would put us to a decision to say we could go one way or the other at some point? I mean, is the cost of outsourcing going to get to be so high that it's going to be the same whether we have it in district or not?
What prevented us at that, when we discussed this previous, was to find a place that we could have. That was what tipped us to say no. The actual hiring of we were going to lease them from Midwest, and so we would have ended up, if we had a location to put the buses, we would have ended up at a lower cost. But we couldn't find, we would have had to buy property, a building. That was the issue.
Okay.
We still have all that data, so we can use it. We just need to find a property with a building on it to house the buses. And we need to be and we even looked at housing the buses at some of our schools, but then it would interfere with the security issue, the parking issue.
We get Pace to vacate that bus, don't they have a bus barn up the road from, where is that?
It's on 120.
Center, 120?
That's what I'm aware of.
Yeah, oh, there's that one, but I think there's one in the center too. Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
No, but I think it still needs to be on our radar.
I mean, one of the things at the III conference that was discussed was several school districts in southern Illinois. Not that that always translates well into Lake County, but they did something very similar in the sense of they brought it in-house, and by bringing it in-house ended up buying the property from the bus company. So that was obviously a little bit of a challenge because the bus company was a little bit making it a little bit challenging trying to sell the property to them. So I think there are options. I would say, in my experience, I've seen that becomes a frequent conversation amongst boards throughout Lake County of, if we're in-house, what happens if we go out-house? Will that save money? And I've seen districts that have outside services come in, and they're like, well, what if we bring it in? Would that save money? And it seems to be, in my experiences, every time that conversation has come up, it seems to be a wash. It's just a question of, are you getting good service? Then at that point, is it really, the price differences seem so minuscule, but it sounds like we might have done this here previously and it might have been some savings. But.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we used to have our own buses. And we had to go out to bid, so they undercut us, and then we had to get rid of our busing. So now we're on the other end, where they've gone.
Well, the increases have been significant every year.
Right.
How long ago were we in-house?
It was before me.
Not in a while.
Before me, I don't know.
Oh, we've been outsourced
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
time you're here. So it seems like one of those things where the pendulum swings.
Yes.
And until complete institutional memory is lost about what a pain it was to get in-house. Right? And then we go from outsourced to in-house when the price becomes more than we think we can bear, and then we take it in-house.
And
And
then,
then everyone remembers what a pain it is, and 8 years later, we're back outsourced. And it'd be probably hard to compare the true cost of having it in-house, because I would propose to you that there's a lot of soft costs associated with having it in-house. People who aren't allocated to the bus program, who spend time on the bus program, and other
right.
unknowns. But I would, before the next meeting, like to know, in the current 6-year, 1-year renewal cycle, what the average, or the annual increase has been during those 6 years each year. I think that would be important to know. And the other point I had was the average age of their fleet. Is that their overall fleet? Because isn't there a set of buses that's assigned to our district?
Yes.
Is that stat you gave us of the average age of the bus going down a year, is that for their whole fleet or for the fleet that we use?
I'd have to go back and look at the email to be specific, but I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to know that, because I know there's some buses that appear pretty decrepit when they roll down my street.
I've seen them.
Just out of curiosity, do you happen to know if, for school districts that have in-house busing, are the drivers union?
Yes,
They are?
Woodland,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
For, what is it, like PSRP union, or is it?
Yeah, PSRP.
Okay.
Now, if you ask Mr. Bobek, he'll say he doesn't like the fact that they have their own, so. But I think it's
Their own
more,
transportation.
yeah, they do their own transportation.
It's just another layer of everything else you gotta do.
Yeah, it isn't he's not talking about cost, but it's like you said, Jason, the soft costs, the union issues, the driver issues.
Time.
Because you have to have 110% for driver. I mean, you have to have many more drivers than what you actually need to.
Right, in case someone's sick.
Yeah.
And more buses in case they break down. And there's even soft costs like pensions. For example, Durham doesn't have to pay for IMRF, and we would. So there's a lot of moving pieces that goes into
We'll pull that
analyzing.
out so that you can take a look at it. It was
Love to.
quite an extensive,
What does that do to our liability insurance?
yeah.
It would make it go up pretty
Oh,
dramatically. The employees who work in that department usually have higher rates of workers' compensation claims or accidents on the job site. It invites a lot more liability.
Have we ever, as a community, talked about walking school buses? Are there people who would opt out of bus, who are already opting out? The parking lots are pretty full at pickup and drop off, so I just wondered.
Did you say the walking school buses?
Yeah, a walking
Park-
school bus.
Park attempted to
Oh.
do that.
What happened?
And they didn't have enough parents to keep that going. And at that school, a lot of the teachers offered to help
Okay.
it, but it sort of fell apart. They did work very hard to get that going.
Can you explain that concept?
So the parents actually walk kids down the path or down towards their.
One parent would collect
Yeah.
10 kids or
Right.
15 kids and walk them all together.
Mhm. We're still waiting on approval for a sign on 83 so that we can eliminate 2 more buses. And you've
Yeah.
called, I've called the state.
I've gotten a lovely conversation from a gentleman who, when I went over his head, called and asked who I thought I was. And it had some very choice language that I was not expecting from a state employee. Maybe I should have been expecting from a state employee.
State
but,
employee.
So we've tried multiple times to try to reach out and to figure this out and to move, because there's a certain, I think we've talked about this before, for hazardous routes, there's certain calculations in terms of, is there a sidewalk there? Are they walking on the side of the road? What's the speed limit on the road? There's a whole calculation that goes into whether or not it's required for us to transport students. And we've even tried to reach out to the village, because I know if we have crossing guards at certain locations, that could reduce entire neighborhoods that we have to bus currently. So, and unfortunately, Ellen and I haven't had very much luck on.
Well, the village is the one that actually helped. We worked collaboratively with them to put that sidewalk so that the kids could come to, but until we get those signs, this reduced speed limit sign, we can't do it.
And the state has plans to
Yes.
widen
Right,
83
that's why they don't want to do
as it
this.
is.
Right.
So they might be holding off because of that. They have plans of putting 2 lanes each direction and a turn lane. And the last one I saw had roundabouts and
Oh, no.
4-lane roundabouts, and not quite sure how that's gonna work, but
On 83.
on 83, yeah. That's the last one I saw, but that's been a couple of years. They are obviously working towards their plans on expanding Route 83, which then would probably put you right back in that
But
dangerous
I
route
don't, right,
anyways.
I wouldn't have this, plus, I didn't have the sidewalk, but the sidewalk will be gone.
Okay, anything else? So you'll bring that back, with those
Mhm.
questions or answers?
I was going to ask, have we looked at joint contracts with District 127?
Yes, I offered to do that. And that, at that point, they didn't want to go that route. We do share some routes with many different, for our special education, Heather can give us, I mean, there's many, we share with several districts for our special education routes to reduce those costs.
We pay a fractional cost of the total bus population on a bus at any given time for Durham.
That's for the out-of-district students. So I think we still need to work with 127 to see if we can do anything.
Anything else? The next is a discussion on board committees.
So currently, we have our, the board committees are the policy and the evaluation and assessment committee, and we have new people on the board, so I didn't know whether we wanted to, so policy committee is Jim and Stephen Strack. The evaluation assessment committee, there's nobody here on the committee now, so,
Anybody have any interest in serving on that? Tom and Kathleen were both on it
Yes.
before they left the board.
I was for a time and found it to be well represented without my talents. But I think there probably people better suited to serve on that, and I keep waiting for the institution of a finance committee. It never comes, but I think I would like to be part of the policy committee
okay.
because I'm currently homeless from a committee point of view.
I'd be interested in evaluation and assessment.
Okay,
I'll remain on diversity, but that's a
okay, that's a superintendent.
freestanding,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, Stephen.
And if anyone can offer a rationalization for creating a finance committee? At the time, didn't we have one about 3 or 4 years ago, and
Yes.
it was related to, what was the point of it?
Had it off and on,
They had it right.
yeah.
There was a specific thing going on, right? It wasn't solar
Yeah.
panels, was it? No.
No, it had to do with the overall budget.
Right.
And trying to get outside citizens and businesses to come and look at our finances and see basically where they thought we could save money. And
Mhm.
it went away.
Yeah.
So I think they pretty much deemed that we were doing all the right things that we were supposed to be doing to begin with, and they couldn't find spots for us to make any major changes. I think that's the reason why it went away.
Yeah, I did. And certain people left the board, so. So Jason, policy, Stephen and Jim, either one of you still?
I'll still do it, sure.
Okay.
Is there a typical number of committees that boards have? Are we
We-
under or over average?
About this average.
Does it depend on what the
Yeah, it
need
depends
is?
on what the focus is.
Depends on what they,
Yeah.
what they're, like, I think
Do you still wanna
127
be on
is
policy?
2, I think
Yeah,
they
just-
have.
Okay.
So it's
'Cause we post them
policy,
anyway.
Something and something committee and then a finance committee, so.
All right, so policy would be Jason, Stephen, and Jim. Evaluation assessment, Stephen?
I'm going to stay. I
Okay.
would like to,
Yeah,
I've been going, so I'd
Yeah.
like to continue going.
okay.
Could you provide more
Um,
detail on the evaluation and assessment committee?
Sure. So what we do is, Paul and Amanda usually lead it, but they talk about what we're doing curriculum-wise, what assessments are coming up, and what changes we're looking at. I know they brought the information about choosing the different curriculums. We talked through that.
I think I'd like that.
Okay, good.
Can someone help me understand what's the process for introducing another committee? We don't have a community engagement committee,
We don't.
and I'm interested in that, but I don't know how that impacts the school and the district.
It's whatever the board chooses to have. We will make
Do
it
we
work.
want one?
We had a framework for one, and it kind of fell by the wayside. So I'd love to see that reinvigorated.
Okay.
And maybe we can talk through what do we want, what are the key areas of focus we want to address, and then we can develop committees around that. Use that as
I think it's critically important. I would support that.
Okay. I would love
Yeah.
to talk more about the framework.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we want to put that together?
Sure. Stephen, if you get a chance, sometime we'll go through that.
Absolutely.
And I'll put it on the agenda for the next discussion.
Anything else? Okay. Review the board agreements. At the end of the last meeting, I had asked us to take a look at the board agreements that we had set up a few years ago that are on the bottom of our packet, which is kind of our more or less governing agreements on how we'll treat each other and behave and expectations and so on and so forth.
And you will look at these again when you, I don't know where Lynn is. There is a
I'm here.
meeting. Where are you?
Second.
There you are. You'll be looking at these again with Dee Molinari. Is it, when are you meeting with them?
October 2nd.
Okay, but it's good to have these at least looked at again.
Right.
And you have the changes that Sean suggested?
You gave those to everybody, right?
Uh-huh,
Yeah, I like Sean's suggestions.
I do too.
Yeah.
Very much.
Everybody good with still following along with those as our guidelines of how we're gonna act and treat each other and be nice to each other? You.
Where's the section on gladiator battles?
That's only in the fall. That's only in the fall.
As long as nobody comes at me with a taser, I'm all right.
I'd like to ask that my birthday remain at the top of this, August 18th,
Oh, okay.
as adopted August 18th, 2016, and amended May 8th, 2019.
In perpetuity.
Yeah.
Well, then we both could be on there because
Your
My
birthday's
birthday's
tonight. That's right.
Happy birthday.
Now that would be,
so we could.
Jason said he wanted to sing too.
Yeah, no.
so.
That's what I heard.
We can hold off on that.
happy birthday.
Like, now it's gotten 3D.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have any other additions or corrections they wanted to do to these? Or they were good with adding Sean's corrections in or changes? Yep. Okay.
We'll change those and then get them in your hands for next time.
Then we're up to topics for future agenda items.
So we have an update on the Arbor breakfast concerns. John, when do you want to do a budget presentation?
Next board meeting, at least a preliminary.
Okay, preliminary. Update on where we are with Harger. First look at a draft of policy regarding requests for abatement, et cetera. Approval of the Durham transportation contract, but we are also going to bring back to you the annual increase, the average age of the fleet that's working for us, and the discussion of the community engagement committee framework. Is there something else, Sue, we need? Okay.
Anybody else have anything else you want to add in? Christine and Sean, so, because the negotiations are ongoing, if you have any questions, please reach out to John or myself or Alan so we can just kind of catch up to speeds of where we're at. You know, it's an open book, so, you know, you obviously have some questions, so we want to make sure we get those answered before we start moving forward.
Very great. Thank you.
Any public comments?
Thank you for moving the board meetings to GMS.
I gotta thank you too, because that makes my life a little easier. Not that you did it for me. Okay, so next is, we don't have any closed sessions for tonight, right? Right, no reason for one. Motion to adjourn.
So,
LaCroy,
Aye.
Mackey,
Aye.
Miller,
aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Next time I